All right, here we are with Supreme Readings, section 2.4 of Pacifism. Skeptical and prima facie pacifism. This should be good. I like skepticism. Arguments in defense of pacifism are usually based on assertions about the immorality of violence and war. Thus, pacifism is usually derived by negation. Pacifism primarily tells us what not to do. As Cheney Ryan has argued, pacifism is a quote-unquote skeptical position. Kind of like anarchism, right? Anarcho-pacifism is almost a redundant hyphenation because one of the best formulations of anarchism is that might is not right, not by default. It doesn't have to be absolute, as we discovered in section 1. So yeah, pacifism is a skeptical position. As Ryan puts this, quote, its general claim is that the proponent of killing cannot produce a single compelling argument for why killing another person is permissible, unquote. And this is the idea of defaulting to might is not right. It's not right unless you can produce that argument. And I've noticed that many people don't have this filter on their thoughts at all, and I realized after years of thinking, why don't people have that? Where I got it from Descartes. Descartes' skeptical method is why I can be radically honest without saying anything false, because radical honesty isn't just saying any words that you hear in your head. That's babbling, often aggressively and violently in language, the way that people say, oh, I'm being radically honest. Radical honesty is only saying what you believe and saying it radically, especially politically radically. So through the Cartesian method, there's a lot that you won't believe, and thus you will never say it under radical honesty. Anyway, one of the skeptical problems that Ryan addresses is the problem that occurs in killing in self-defense. Okay? When a victim kills an aggressor in self-defense, this killing occurs before the aggressor has actualized his malicious intention. Of course, it's an actual intention, related to what I was saying the previous yesterday. In this case, killing in self-defense is out of proportion to the harm done, since the victim who kills in self-defense was not himself killed. Yeah, that's the harm actually done, not the harm that was about to be done. A skeptical version of pacifism can thus develop from the worry that when we choose to kill in self-defense, we never know whether this killing is in fact justifiable. Oh, so maybe they were just trying to scare you by making you think they were trying to kill you. I don't know. It's pretty skeptical. This is why, of course, we often don't have the death penalty. Although in Canada you can be locked up for life as a dangerous offender, and spoiler alert on my slowly unveiling life story, my mother dated 2 of those dangerous offenders. Anyway, enough of this Mr. Golding guy. Oh, of the first 40, anyway. I learned pacifism, and one of the many, many reasons. I did mention that I was taught something like this in grade 4. I learned something like this when I went briefly to church. My grandparents, who are non-observant, certainly had views like this, and my grandfather, being a civil servant at Base Borden, yeah, he had a view or two about peace, and that's how he lost his faith, actually, because of the actions of Hitler. He didn't think that World War II was consistent with the just world, and thus there can't be an omnipotent, all-good being. But for more on that, see my personal article, The Snake is Why the Tree Exists. Genesis expresses the scientific method. That is my take on the problem of evil that cost my grandfather his faith in God. I'm still an atheist, though, because I think God is not literal. No God is literal. See that in Anarcho-Christian Atheist Polytheism, that article, or now the new, more expanded one, What World Peace Requires, which obviously is, fueled partly by my reading of this article, and of course everything else that's going on, which is quite a lot of fighting. So, this sort of skeptical position can be linked to the just war tradition's concern with the question of quote-unquote last resort in thinking about jus ad bellum. Skeptical pacifists wonder how we would know that we ever reach the stage of last resort when violence becomes necessary. One way that pacifists articulate this concern is to focus on the variety of nonviolent measures that could be employed before it becomes necessary to resort to force. Indeed, it may be argued that to resort to violence is to admit to a failure of imagination and to give up hope that more humane forms of problem solving and conflict resolution can be effective. Moreover, pacifists will note that it is not sufficient to try nonviolent methods once and then disregard them. Sure. Rather, one must engage in a variety of nonviolent actions and one must try these nonviolent alternatives more than once. Yeah. A somewhat different version of skeptical pacifism can be found in critiques of militarism and the ideology and propaganda that lead people to support war. Well, we haven't seen any of that, have we? This skeptical stance has been defended by Fiala. In this approach, skepticism produces a practical political pacifism that is based upon the fact that citizens have no good reason to trust that their governments are telling them the truth about war and its justification. In fact, we have every reason to believe the opposite. It's called the fog of war, which is one reason I'm not just going to make confident claims about what's happening in the Middle East. It's filtered through the media. I know how bad my media is. I had to vastly increase my media diet when the New York Times gave Hillary Clinton a 98% chance of victory. Like, it's a hall of mirrors sometimes, guys. I'm not going to, I don't know what's happening in a lot of wars, right? You're not there. We are being lied to about a lot of it. So it's good to have provisional conclusions, some kind of, provisional conclusions anyway. This skepticism is derived from historical judgments about the tendency of governments to manipulate information in order to provoke the citizenry toward war. In light of such skepticism, the burden of proof for the justification of war is placed upon the government, who must prove that the dangerous and presumptively immoral activity of war can in fact be justified, and you would hope pass a vote in Congress, although I'm pretty sure the war on drugs and the war on terror didn't do that. Double check that for me, folks. I'm too busy reading about pacifism. Okay, so this sort of skepticism might also be called, quote-unquote, prima facie pacifism. Of course. This is the idea that war is usually wrong except in certain extraordinary circumstances when it is compellingly shown that the evil of war is a sort of lesser evil that is necessary for some greater good. Prima facie pacifism presumes that war is wrong, but allows for exceptions, such as killing Hitler. Prima facie pacifism places the burden of proof upon the proponent of war. It is up to the proponent of war to prove, in a given circumstance, that war is in fact morally necessary. And that's exactly anarchism, by the way, in a special case. That the default is that power differences are not justified, violence is not justified, might is not right, and it requires a very high burden of proof to overcome that. 2.5. Oh, a section boundary. See you in the next video.